The Valley of the Kings is the largest complex of royal tombs in the world, and there are more than 60 tombs of kings, princes, and a sea of the treasures that disappeared throughout the ages. Nothing remains of it except the tomb of King Tutankhamun. What happened to the treasures of more than 60 royal tombs in the Valley of the King? Today we will talk about the events mentioned in the texts. The ancient Egyptian stele tombs of the Valley of the Kings. With the start of building the Egyptians for the pyramids, to be tombs in which they put their dead and their kings, and everything they need in the other world of gold, precious stones, pieces of furniture, and even food and drink, and this made the pyramids an explicit announcement to thieves about the location of the treasures, and within 1,000 years he made all the pyramids plundered completely, which made the pharaohs abandon building the pyramids, and search for another place, and indeed they found the appropriate place next to the capital, Thebes, on the western bank of the Nile River, and it was a closed and narrow valley. The cemetery, no one will be able to reach it. Orders were given to the workers to carve it in the rock. The profession of burial of kings flourished and the traffic spread. Within 100 years, the Valley of the Kings became full of tombs of kings and princes, and thousands of workers were introduced to work in the profession of making tombs of painters and sculptors, and a number terrible from the different professions. First, the events mentioned in the Egyptian texts about the theft of the tombs of the Valley of the Kings are the records of the trial of Banya. Bamia was an orphan child in Thebes who was adopted by a building superintendent. In the Valley of the Kings, when he grew up, his father died in mysterious circumstances. Days passed and Bane took over his father's position as a builder superintendent in the Valley of the Kings. Bane was hateful of the tombs of the kings that are full of treasures, and here Bane decided to exploit his position to plunder the tombs. The construction workers, in order for it to be a professional gang of cemetery workers. Indeed, a constructive gang began to implement their plan to rob the tombs. The plan was to bribe the tomb guards and break down the door of the cemetery. From the cemetery, because ancient Egypt had a large market. It is very important to trade in the treasures stolen from the tombs, so the thieves used to take the jewelry stolen from the tombs and melt it down in the fire and formed in different forms so as not to be recognized when selling it. The sale of stolen jewelry continued and theft of tombs until vanity managed to build it, and when King Seti II died. Bane was amazed at the large amount of treasures that were entered into the tomb, so he decided to rob the tomb, 2 days after the king was buried. Like every time they bribed the guards of the cemetery, and when entering the cemetery's vessels, you will not believe the amount of treasures. And the vanity that afflicted him was able to control the amount of treasures inside the tomb, and he felt that he had become rich, so he began to drink from the fine wine that is inside the tomb, and here was the end. He gets drunk, until he loses consciousness. And I feel it after the guards of the cemetery, which were not bribed. The builder is arrested until the sentence is executed. Here we will ask a question. What is the ruling? Theft of tombs of the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians considered theft of tombs a major crime, especially so it was a cemetery, owned or belonged to one of the nobles, and the sentence was death by impalement, and the sentence was executed on Bamia. The second is a memory event. In historical texts, about the theft of tombs, it was in 1156 BC, during the reign of Ramses III, when the Egyptian Empire began to weaken, the border regions began to rebel against royal rule, and the peoples of the sea attacked the Egyptian people. Egypt was also struck by drought, so supplies began. The monthly fees that were paid to the workers of the cemeteries as wages were reduced and delayed, until it was stopped, so the workers began to get angry and started. They go on strike, and this was the first revolution in history and chaos, and the famine made the workers tend to rob the graves, because they thought each one among them, he must take his due from. And the third event mentioned in the ancient Egyptian texts. About theft of tombs, records of theft of tombs. During the reign of Ramses IX, the records consist of 2 papyri. The Abbot Papyrus and the Amherst Papyrus. The first papyrus talks about the report of he reached the court about the looting of some of the tombs of the royal family, and the second papyrus talks about the trial of some thieves who plundered the royal tombs and the non-royal tombs. In the 2 papyruses, 2 of the most senior statesmen were mentioned. At this time, he was the governor of Thebes, the eastern city. The second was the governor of Thebes, and each one was an enemy of the other. The events begin when a simple construction worker and 7 people destroy the wall of a royal tomb and start looting the treasures of the tomb, and they raise the king's coffin until they get the royal jewels from the body of the pharaoh, and after completing the theft of the tomb lights it with fire and in the body of the pharaoh, and no one felt them because they agreed with the chief the police, and on the second day the worker goes to give the police chief his share of the stolen cemetery. However, the building inspector discovers the presence of some stolen tombs. He informs the governor of Taiba al-Sharqiya about the theft of the tombs. Upon learning of the police chief, he threatens, and they threaten that if his name is found in the case, his family will die. And the worker confesses that he had 7 people with him who participated in the theft, and the worker's report was about the theft. We went as usual to rob the graves. So we entered a royal cemetery and it was full of treasures, so we opened the king's sarcophagus and found around my neck many golden amulets and ornaments and the king's golden mask and the mummy was in order for the theft to be judged, he is brought to the courtyard in order to repeat his confession before the court. The verdict was issued by the minister, which was an unexpected surprise. The minister knows that the accusations of the eastern governor of Teba to the western Teba governorate are untrue, and that most of the graves are intact, and the only one that was stolen is the one that was stolen from the construction worker. Thus, the construction worker and his accomplices were sentenced to death. Here, the worker admits that the chief of police and the governor of Teba al-Gharbiya are involved with him in robbing graves and royal tombs. Also, a number of residents of the city. The last confession of the worker put the minister in an embarrassing position. He issued an order to search the entire city. And here was the surprise: that the stolen pieces were found completely in the homes of merchants, books, priests, tomb guards, and even the home of the high priest's wife. Cemetery guards. But after a period of time, the minister issues a pardon for all thefts, except for the price of thieves, and the death sentence is imposed on them. And Dr. Zay Hawass talks about the case, saying that it is clear that the minister himself was in agreement with the thieves because of his amnesty for most of the thieves, and after a while, the governor of Teba al-Sharqiya was dismissed from his post because of his false accusations. As for the governor of western Thebes, he becomes the first responsible for securing the royal tombs, and with the passage of time, all treasures disappear from the tombs of the Valley of the Kings.